Most competency models are constructed or assembled by committee. Executives get a say. It goes through HR, it goes through the subject matter experts, it goes through leadership, then comes along the CEO who wants to put his or her inputs in, and eventually it's the story of a great compromise. It's this big, beautiful thing that took a year to create, that involves everything and everyone's opinions, and it drifts so far away from what's actually predicting performance in the organization that by the time it's finished, many times a year later, it's abandoned or refreshed.
Hogan's approach to competencies is unique because it is based on personality. It's based on the idea that if you can fully understand a person with a great level of detail and know what they do when they're at their best, what they do when they're under pressure, and what drivers or values they have, that should be able to give you a lot of information on the competencies that they're most likely to acquire.
Any intervention, any decision you make about people of any kind needs to be based on real data and on a competency model. So it applies to every possible HR process. Performance appraisal, selection, promotion, salary increments, hiring, firing.
So competencies are basically behavioral characteristics that are bundled into themes. And in many companies, they provide the benchmarks for evaluating success. Personality basically provides the foundational characteristics of these competencies or bundled themes. To put it in another way, I like to think of personality as the elements and competencies as the compounds or the molecules that we can build when we combine them. We've always provided those elements, and with Configure, we've taken those same scientific standards to build an off-the-shelf option that features predictive combinations, or as organizations call them, competencies. And Hogan assessments are reputational, and the scales are valid measures of observable behaviors. And these behaviors predict workplace success.
So our competency model lists more than 60 competencies because we're really getting at the subtle nuances of these behaviors and then mapping them to our Hogan scales. So whether that be adjustment on the Hogan personality inventory, excitable on the Hogan development survey. Ultimately what we're doing is we're using the Hogan tools, the Hogan assessments as a foundation, and then we're translating these characteristics into behavioral competencies that the world understands.
Typically the process whereby companies come up with competency models, if they do a good job, they will do a thorough analysis of top performers in different jobs, and then they look at what characteristics these people have. So it really is a way to reconfigure, if you like, our personality scales in a language and in a model that is used by the organization currently.
Over the years, we've studied jobs across the world, across industries, up and down organizations, through the lens of personality. Using all of those studies, we are now finally able to scientifically predict the fulfillment of a competency.
One, we've done an amazing job with the interface. It's new, it's different, it's very slick. The other is that we've really taken competencies to another level.
So for example, if you want to evaluate a salesperson on his or her competencies and you go into our system, we've got enough studies on salespeople to tell you what companies from around the world are doing, how they're evaluating their salespeople and what competencies they're using. But we understand that organizations also have their own unique evaluation models. And so maybe you want to swap one of those competencies for something that's a little more relevant to your industry, to your country, to the level of this sales individual. And we enable you to do that.
And there's a balance when you get your key competencies associated with it. But if I know this is a sales role that is going to require beating on doors and a lot of communication, we might tweak those domains a little bit more.
It's ideal for profiling very large numbers of employees, and in a very quick way it enables organizations to match or plug in their competency models to our personality assessments.
Not all organizations create a competency model that they feel comfortable with and that they stick with over time. The 62 Hogan competencies have been in place for a long time, and we continue to focus on our research to make sure we're doing a better job of measuring these competencies. We're using the right Hogan scales and behavioral characteristics. So it brings the science, it brings the prediction, and it also brings consistency to competencies.